Compare this with a criminal who is given every chance to prove his innocence, who would not rather be a murderer and take the chance for life than be declared insane without hope of escape.
Elizabeth Jane Cochran, better known by her pen name Nellie Bly, was a heroic woman of the late 1800s who broke many social limitations of her time. As a female reporter/editor, she was restricted to writing articles in women's section of her local newspaper. Over time, however, she was able to use her skill and determination to break down the barrier to females within journalism and earn her place as an authentic journalist. Nellie Bly made positive changes to women's advancement in the workplace by demonstrating on a national scale that females were more capable and less fragile than their image previously portrayed in print. She also made a dramatic expose of Blackwell Island's insane asylum. This exposure led to drastic improvements to the United States treatment of mental health by breaking down the curtain and allowing America to look into these asylums with a more critical eye. This is how Nellie Bly broke barriers in the mental health industry.
Elizabeth Cochran was born in Cochran's Mill, Pennsylvania on May 5, 1864. The town itself was founded by her father, Michael Cochran. From an early age, she grew up with 14 siblings. Her father, an influential local judge, passed away when Elizabeth was just 6, leaving the large family in a great deal of trouble. When he died, the family suffered financial issues because Michael left no will for his estate. Throughout her childhood, she often wore light pink dresses, which led her family to give her the name Pinky. At the age of 15, she left home to enroll at Indiana Normal School, a school for training students to become teachers. Unfortunately, she was forced to abandon her education as there was not enough money to stay enrolled. After her father's death, her mother remarried but soon got a divorce because of abuse. The loss of her father and abusive nature of her stepfather drove her to be a stronger figure in the family to take care of her mother and siblings. This led her to get a job in a local boarding home to support her large family of 14 siblings.
Despite losing her access to higher education, she remained an avid reader. When Elizabeth was 18 years old, she recalled reading a newspaper from the Pittsburgh Dispatch. An article provided its readers with a list of attributes that women shared, but also suggested that they had several shortcomings of their manner. The author, Eramis Wilson, suggested that a woman outside of her proper sphere is a monstrosity and that her place was in the home, that it was her responsibility to manage the home and make it a quote-unquote paradise. After becoming upset by this shallow understanding of women, she wrote a response explaining how furious she was with the paper. After the editor of the paper read her response, he was impressed, and she was offered a job as a reporter for the Pittsburgh Dispatch newspaper. Elizabeth took the job and was given the pen name Nellie Bly. She was tasked with writing the women's section of the newspaper. She was expected to discuss topics like food, fashion, and society. Bly felt insulted over time and wanted to focus on more than just female topics and decided journalism needed to be more of a career opportunity, just as it was for her male counterparts.
In 1887, Nellie left her job and went to New York City in search of a better career opportunity. After researching a variety of publications, she began working at a major newspaper company of the time called the New York World. She discussed how she felt that simply writing on female concerns was beneath her. One of her first assignments when she arrived was to expose the conditions in Blackwell Island's insane asylum. She was to pose as a mentally unstable person to get committed to the facility. Bly and her editor had an agreement that after 10 days of living in the asylum, he would come and send someone to free her. Knowing that her identity should remain a secret, her editor instructed her to identify herself as Nellie Brown.
Nellie's first step into getting committed was to go stay at a women's boarding house called the Temporary Home for Females, number 84 2nd Avenue. The night she arrived at the boarding house, she pretended as if she was insane to convince the other tenants that she was truly unstable. Bly began imitating, making unusual statements, and questioning the women to prove her insanity. The other women staying at the boarding house were terrified of Nellie and called the police. After the police arrived, they escorted her to the nearby courthouse to be examined by a judge. After briefly seeing Nellie's condition, he ordered that a doctor also examine Miss Brown. The doctor's line of questioning was concerning to Nellie. This scared her greatly as he ruled her insane rather quickly due to her behaviors. As planned, Nellie was then admitted to Blackwell's Island Insane Asylum. A few days later, Bly boarded a filthy ferry to take her and other uncomprehending women to the island. She recalled that the ferryman called it the island where you'll never get out of.
Nellie Bly arrived in the asylum in the fall of 1887. The asylum was supposed to originally hold 1,000 patients, but Bly entered the facility when it was housing more than 1,600. As Nellie met the patients, she befriended them. She noticed that women were not well cared for and most of them weren't insane. Some of them were also immigrants who were unable to communicate. When she arrived, they stripped her clothes and gave her filthy garments. After being stripped, she was forced alongside other female patients to take a freezing ice bath. Immediately after the bath, they were put into clothing which quickly became soaked. They had to wear these damp garments for hours, which sometimes led to illnesses like hypothermia.
She immediately noticed how unsanitary the facility was. The rooms stunk and were filthy. Her roommates and other patients described how they were treated and the living conditions they faced. To make matters worse, all they had to eat was moldy stale bread and rotten meat. During meals, the women would fight over the food. Nellie got her food stolen but was offered some more by another patient. She found a spider living in the bread, and the food was so horrible she couldn't eat it. She was told if she didn't eat, she would go crazy. The women who refused to eat or complained about the food were punished by being beaten. Nellie found out that the women were sexually abused and were raped by the staff members.
After staying there for a little while, she began to realize what was truly happening to the patients. Several procedures were being used to keep the patients docile, including shock therapy and lobotomies. Electric shock therapy is a procedure where patients are strapped down to a bed and electrical probes are used to shock the patients on their temples. Lobotomies were a procedure where patients were sedated and mental rods were inserted into the patient's eye sockets, and it was used to adjust the brain. Both of these procedures would leave the patients docile but had physical repercussions. Brain damage and physical scars around the face and forehead were often the results of these invasive procedures. Luckily, Nellie was able to avoid these traumatizing procedures.
After 10 days in Blackwell Island's insane asylum, Bly's publisher came to break her out. After eating a warm meal, Bly began to write her exposé. The World newspaper published several of these articles and found that these were a hit with their readers. A month after her release, Bly was called in for a court hearing where she reported on what she had witnessed. During this inquiry, she was able to address these atrocities that she saw firsthand. The jury deliberated, and after hearing Bly's account, agreed that they should see these atrocities as well. A group of them returned to the facility with Nellie. While this case was occurring, the staff of Blackwell read the articles and heard rumors of this inquisition. Within the time, they drastically tried to fix these issues. Abusive staff members were fired and removed from the island, translators were found to help immigrant patients, and administrators took more precautions to prevent those who do not actually suffer from mental illness from being committed.
After exposing Blackwell Island, Bly continued to write articles of her experiences. Due to the success of the exposé, her publisher wanted her to make other articles. Some of her other famous articles were Reporting for the World, Nellie Bly Embarks on a Race to Circumnavigate the Globe, an idea inspired by the popular fictional book Around the World in 80 Days. Nellie Bly arrives in New Jersey to an elaborate welcome and a large crowd, completing her trip around the world in a record-breaking 72 days. Bly secretly marries millionaire Robert Seaman after a scandalously short courtship. Bly's husband dies and she becomes principal owner of the Ironclad Manufacturing Company. Returning to journalism, Bly reports from Austria as a World War I correspondent. Known as the good fairy to homeless children, Bly helps to solve the mystery of the Love Me Mike baby. Bly dies of pneumonia in New York hospital. This level of stunt journalism made Nellie Bly a household name.